Awesome. Thank you guys for joining us here on our Class Intercom Zoom webinar. This is our third, I believe, and I'm excited today to highlight one of our first schools that jumped on board with this, the Grand Island Northwest Vikings, and we're happy to be joined by a lot of their students who are on their social media intern team, social media team, and then Heather Callihan, their tech integration specialist for their district, who handles a lot of their social media and has really built this team and got students engaged. And so, Heather, I'll go ahead and have you introduce yourself and your team here. I'm going to go ahead and spotlight your video, and I'll let you take it from there, and then I'll ask you some questions.
Okay. Like Taylor said, I'm Heather Callihan. I'm the technology integrationist here at Northwest. We have been Class Intercom for almost 2 years now, I would say, or almost a full year.
1 year. Yep.
We launched or piloted about a year ago. It was about this time last year when we kind of got started and had a couple students piloting for us. And now you can see we've got Maddie and Heidi testing out this awesome camera. Carter and Taylor and Megan. So we've got a couple more that couldn't quite make it, but this is a good representation of students that we have on our team that are creating content. It just seems like anytime I send out a message on Remind, there's somebody in the group that's just on the spot, ready to create it and post it. And I'm amazed at the quick turnaround on some of the requests. And there's so many times now that we have been so consistent now. It seems like there's a lot of times now where they read my mind before I even have to say anything. So I don't feel like I have to send out a lot of requests. They kind of know the drill and kind of know what needs to be out there. So it's been pretty awesome.
And that is exactly, the goal with this whole thing. And when we kind of first talked, take me back to last spring when you first started, and I kind of casted the vision. You were the first guest on the podcast. I kind of said, hey, what would this look like from your standpoint in integrating and getting students involved in social media? Up until then, it was basically you and explain a little bit more about your district too, the size and the things you do in your role. And then layer on top of that, you're asked to do a lot of the social media, which is great, but you physically can't be in all the places at all the time. And then some of your admin pop in there as well, but just from take us through that kind of process.
I think like any school, the social media piece is very unique. Over the past 5 years, it's a big part of how your school is sharing their story and marketing themselves. And so in my role as tech integrationist, I assumed that part of that social media responsibility as far as, utilizing Facebook and Twitter. We do have administrators that have access to those accounts, but it almost seems like no matter how hard you try, you can't be at everything. Or if you are at something, you aren't consciously, making that conscious effort to create something. When you came to me about a year ago about Class Intercom and having students create that, my biggest thing was the authentic way to integrate the digital citizenship skills. In my role, I do a lot of digital citizenship teaching. Sometimes I like to call it preaching because it's a lot of that stand and deliver. And I was always looking for ways, how can students apply these things? You can tell them, don't do this. This is what it should look like. But it's so important to give them those applicable opportunities to practice what you're saying. And so that's the first thing that clicked with me with Class Intercom was, wow, this is a great opportunity for students to practice creating that content. And then it also gives them a very broad audience, not just on their own profile or their own, but they're creating something for the school. And then to amplify that, we're getting content out there and it's student voice. It's coming from their perspective. The posts are coming from their experiences at the events, their experiences in the classroom. And I think that's awesome. So we started small, probably like any other school. Last spring, when we first started talking about it, I had one student who was a senior who had a lot of experience and a lot of practice with social media, excuse me, and posting positive stuff related to our school. He was leading the Shipyard account, which is our student section, the Shipyard is our student section social media account on Twitter. And so when you came to me, at the time, I had no idea who it was. And so I was on a mission to figure out who was behind that account. And I thought that was a perfect person. So that was Mitch Fisher. He was a perfect person to add as a pilot intern, I guess, to do that. And so between him and myself and administrators, we kind of just went from there. It proved to be successful. And then, of course, he was a senior. So the next thing on the list was to figure out how can we grow this for next year. It was a successful opportunity, but we knew that we needed more people. You know, student voice is one thing, but when you've got 5, 6, 7 people, it's just that much better. So Mitch was very helpful at suggesting some of these folks. And then actually we have Danny, his brother, on the team as well. He had some content from the track meet yesterday, which was good. And so that's what, when you look at this group of students and they start sharing how they're involved in here, one of the things that we put as a priority was getting students that are involved in a lot of different things, whether it's activities, music, sports. We've got one on our team that's involved in the robotics club. So just getting as many students as we can, representing as many organizations and experiences at the school as we can.
Talk about your district from the size perspective, the high school and then the feeder schools too, just to give people context there.
Okay, so we have our high school is a 9-12, and then we have 4 feeder schools. 3 of them are K-8s and 1 is a K-5, and we are not close together. So when I assumed my role, part of my role is to travel to the different buildings. And so with traveling, I'm not always in the high school. I'm not always available to meet with these kids. And so one of the things that I think is interesting too is these students that are involved in class intercom, we call it an intern, and that's because it's not a class during the school day. We're a district, I think we're up 1,500 students.
Okay. Perfect.
That's right.
So why don't you maybe take us through a little bit on you kind of coined the intern program, which has kind of caught on with what Josh Allen's doing at Lewis Central. And now we're kind of trying to encourage that at other schools, and that kind of helped with some of the funding too, to pay for it. So just briefly touch on that. And then I want to chat with the students as well.
Okay. So what the internship looks like, is that what you mean? Like how?
Yeah. And how that was, how you came upon that with your curriculum director, I think, right? Or maybe take us through that story.
We, one of our goals is to do any partnering we can with our community and provide those real world opportunities for our students. Yep. Whether they're doing something on our site for that business or for that school or for whoever they're working for, or they're going off-site and providing a service or getting that real-world experience based on their future goals. And so I felt like this program was a perfect fit to internship. No, they're not leaving and going to support an organization doing marketing for someone else, but they're essentially marketing for our school. And so with that whole internship program, this was just we just felt like it was a great fit, because you're still providing a service for the school, you're marketing our school, and again, it's very applicable real world experience for them, creating that content to share with a broader audience.
Awesome. Perfect. All right. So why don't you guys, I want to highlight each of you as students and share a little bit about who you are, what grade you're in, and what you're involved in maybe would be a great start. And if you want to add kind of some of the stuff you've brought to the social media team, that would be great. So we'll start with you, Maddie.
Hi there. I'm Maddie, and I'm a junior at this school. And essentially, I'm a newer member to Class Intercom. So I was introduced to it from Mrs. Callihan and Taylor, invited to join the team. And I think it's been an excellent opportunity because, again, like I can mention that it provides, once you get out into the real world, you have to know how to handle professional relationships, know how to maybe, especially with our world that's changing, establish that on social media. So this kind of gives me a little bit of insight as to how to communicate effectively online and also be able to share, what each of our lives are like in different ways involved in the school. And particularly when I do post on Class Intercom, I try to get some classroom stuff. So for example, the other day I was in French class and we were making Mardi Gras masks. And so I decided to post about that because I think it's cool because a lot of people wouldn't know about that. And then we were just dissecting a sheep brain and anatomy. So I'm probably going to make a post about that because it's just things that people aren't aware of. But as far as if I could summarize what my part to the team is I would say I'm involved in activities like Quiz Bowl and World Food Prize. So I do more of the academic aspects of, sharing content for the social media, and I thoroughly enjoy it.
That is awesome. I think that's a huge part, and I feel like we're seeing that trend begin to happen where you kind of build someone around the strengths and what they're involved in, and then everyone else knows that. Like Maddie is going to be sharing this type of content, and now we'll go to Heidi.
Okay, my name's Heidi, and I'm a junior here, and I'm involved in the dance team and our show choir, and then I also play soccer in the spring, and I'm involved in FBLA and FCA, and just like what I share mostly about is more of like the music side of things and a lot with the dance team because that's something that is kind of like, it's a small organization at our school and it's something that not a lot of people hear about. And so I share a lot of that. And the thing that I really like about just creating content and sharing is actually when we were a month or two ago when we did like the webinar for the social media thing, we like got introduced more to Canva and like creating like I don't know what you would call them, like graphics. Yeah, we and so that day we like had a lot of time, and I think I made like 5 or 6 different graphics, and like now I like using that a lot because then you can make like unique little posts and things that are like fun to look at and just like interesting. And so that's something that I've done. Like I think I made one for coming up for Easter next week and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's been awesome to see. I've been seeing those, and we will show those here in a second. I'll get into the account and show those because I think that just adds a lot of, everyone always talks about adding a photo or a graphic to something on social media, just makes it more engaging, gives you more, you can provide more information than you can in the copy too. And it adds a lot of value to the post. So I love it. All right, we'll go to the only dude in the room.
All right, my name's Carter, and I'm a junior, and I play football and basketball. And I post a lot about like sports, and since I play football, and I like to like make graphics about like sports and stuff. And since I'm in like a digital broadcast class, we make a lot of I have a lot of practice with videos and video production and making just like cool graphics. And so I do a lot of stuff like that.
Carter's taking digital media independent study.
Yeah.
Digital Media 2 independent study. And so part of his responsibility is to he did all the Strive graphics during basketball season. He's doing that this semester. And so a lot of the graphics that promote those types of things are coming from him. And so his would be unique in that some of that stuff that he's creating is coming from a class, but not all of it. And then he also has some videos and stuff that he's shared too. So another great perspective.
Perfect. All right, we'll go to the person with the best name in the room.
My name is Taylor. I'm a senior, and I'm involved in volleyball. I also run the Shipyard account, so I post a lot about sports and stuff because I go and support. I'm not in a lot of sports, but I always go and watch them. I'm in National Honor Society, and with that, we have like a lot of blood drives, and so it's nice to like post stuff on social media so I can recruit people because it's kind of hard to have to call everyone and do that. So social media is nice to use. FBLA, SCA, crew, so I can get backstage stuff for musical and show choir. Yeah.
Awesome. And have you been doing any of the graphics or anything, or just?
Yeah, for the blood drive, I created a graphic, and they actually put it on the website too, the school, so people could sign up.
Cool. And I feel like you added, if I remember correctly, you were the one that really upped the emoji game for Northwest. Like when you first started, like you kind of All right, let's go to that next level with emojis. And I love that. I share that story with every school. Like, that's what students are going to bring to make social media fun, right? And now I see Heather starting to do some of those same things. Like,
I
and
haven't
that's
seen
just
that post yet. We'll see.
right. It's super cool. So good work. All right, go to Megan.
Okay, so I'm Megan. I'm a junior. I'm involved in volleyball, basketball, soccer, FBLA, FCA, and National Honor Society. And I kind of post more of like the athletic side and the games that are coming up and trying to get people to just like come out and support the games. And I just like, I guess one of my favorite parts about Class Intercom is just sharing the story from our perspective and like seeing all the stuff that goes on, not just the finished product or like maybe something the basketball team is doing instead of just a game. Like this winter we went out and did Adopt a Family, and we just like took pictures of everything we were doing, and like we got to share that, and it's stuff that people may not know that we actually do. And so it's just like different stuff that is fun to share.
Awesome. All right, let's zoom out, Heather. Maybe you get the whole group, and I'll just kind of chime in here a little bit and say, just to the people watching here, how kind of awesome it is when you put together a team like this. I don't think it was intentional on how maybe at first, but now you kind of realize how important it is to get students that are involved in different things and utilizing their strengths, and finding out that Heidi likes to do graphics, and now she's adding graphics to that. And Taylor's really good at emojis, and Carter's really good with the sports and the digital media, and Megan likes to do some of the sports on the game stuff as well. And then you have Maddie, who's in the classroom, and I think that's super important. If you don't take anything away other than just listening to some awesome students share about how they're creating social media content, I think that would be it. And thinking about how you can build this team of students, and you can do that at any grade level too, because I know we have some people watching that are thinking about how to do this with junior high students, and I think you can absolutely do that. Let's go ahead, and I'll just kind of have you, Heather, as I'm showing your account here. I'm going to share the screen into your Class Intercom account, and maybe talk a little bit about how unique it is you don't have a class built around this. It was super difficult to even get you guys all in the same room here at 8:30 in the morning, right? Like, because you guys, as you guys just heard, you're involved in so many different things, but how you communicate, and the different kind of tools and apps you've used, and then talk about that day we had the social media conference and how big that was. So
Okay.
I will spotlight your video for a second, and then I will share your screen of your account while you're talking. So
Okay.
maybe you can put it on, if you want to scroll it over to you, you can share a little bit about that.
Scroll it over to myself. Fun. Okay. So, as far as communication, I feel like it was kind of trial and error, to be honest with you, Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
I know last year I communicated with Mitch through email, and then this year when I grew the team, I started with email. And I'm sure any teacher that's watching or that's part of education can feel the struggle. Email's a hard one. Kids who just don't check their email.
And I'd like to interrupt. How many times a day are you guys checking your email, students?
I check it constantly, actually.
You are? Okay.
Once. Yeah, I check it maybe
I always
once.
click it when there's a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have it coming to your phone?
Carter has a notification. Anytime there's a little number that pops up, it drives him crazy. So he is a checker. But so that was the hard thing, is because and then you never know if they get it if you know they're not checking.
Right. Yep.
And then I went to Google Classroom and created a classroom. And I felt like it kind of worked. I remember this year, my first successful Google Classroom post was something about a little challenge, and the first one was to 5 gets a Sonic gift card. Do you guys remember that?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
And that worked, and I knew that they read that because all of a sudden there was lots of posts, and it was kind of a lull. I think it might have been in between seasons or something, and so I was just trying to promote some more content going out there, and I was struggling because I wasn't at all the events and didn't have the photos or whatever. And so I wouldn't say that Classroom was a failure. I just felt like it was something that all the other classrooms were using, and they were probably going into those their Google Classrooms for their core area classes more than they were paying attention to that. So between email the other funny thing is I felt like I was emailing them sometimes to tell them to go to Google Classroom, and I'm like, this is silly. I shouldn't be doing that. And then that brings me to the social media conference. Was that last month? February.
Yeah, it was in February. Yep.
And we actually brought in this group and a couple others just to hear all the great things that you had to share, with just kind of amping it up, and how are you sharing your story, and just the whole idea of creating versus consuming. Interestingly enough, we did not get to go to the conference on site. We had to attend virtually just because of impending weather, which actually ended up being a benefit to us because, like you said, I don't have these guys as a class, so we don't have like carved out time for creation. So they're on their own to create. You know, I trust that they're going to cover lots of different things, which they do. It's been amazing. But there are some times when I'm like, don't forget this, don't forget that, and I have to, send out messages. But what was so powerful and awesome about that day, even though we didn't get to go to Lincoln and enjoy the city and eat lunch downtown and do all that fun stuff, when the conference was over virtually, they stayed with us in the conference room here at school, and we just had a creation hour. It was like an hour and a half, and we had a Google Doc of running notes, and we just listed a bunch of different things that were coming up, all the way from that day in February to like the end of the school year. So we've been able to have that content and then more. But what was interesting is we were able to sit down and list all the things that we needed to create and then divvy it up. And so, these guys were all jumping like, I'll do this one, I'll do that one. And on your screen there, you have the blood drive one that Taylor created.
Yep.
And so we had so much content just from that hour and a half, just that 90 minutes that was scheduled to go out, anywhere from blood drives to we hadn't even hit spring sports. I think the sports jamboree was in there too as a post for soccer game.
Yeah, here's the one that.
Yeah, you can see it right there. So
Taylor made all these, or did Heidi help with some of the graphics?
I think I made those.
Oh, you did. Yeah, look at all these emojis.
Yeah.
And the other thing we did that day, besides the content creation, is that's when I had an opportunity to introduce them all to Canva. And so that was some of them had seen it before, a couple of them might have seen it before, but most of them had not seen it. And so pretty much everybody was in Canva creating for that hour and a half. Another interesting takeaway from that day was I just decided I was going to flat out ask them what the best way to communicate was. I said, I've tried Google Classroom, and I, again, wouldn't say it was a failure. I've tried email, wouldn't say it was a failure. It just felt like there's holes, communication holes. And I don't even remember who said it. Somebody said, just create a remind. That's what everyone else does. Like, okay. So I created it right there and added them all. And that's how we've done it. And they can all speak because they get the remind message that I send, but I would say it's successful because if I send something out, I feel like somebody is right on top of it. And again, I don't have to do it a whole bunch. Most of what I've done has been reminders for this meeting today. A couple content ones, but I think that has proven to be successful. And I think that's what I'm going to continue to use as I move forward.
So the story you told me just popped in my head of you using Remind when something got misspelled and your principal texted you or AD had texted you. Do you remember that story?
I do. It was.
Do you want to share it?
Yeah, I can.
Just be raw and authentic.
I know. Just like anybody, and I've done it before. I've had mistakes and misspellings, and I've had people text me and say, oops, you need to change that or whatever. And there's always something you miss. But that's the beauty of social media, is that in those situations is you have the ability to change that and update it and whatever, change it. So we had a situation, just an oversight of a misspelled word. And I got a text from a principal, and they said, hey, did you misspell that word? And I said, yeah, I'll take care of it. So I took the blame and said, it's not that big of a deal. But the awesome thing about it is I was able to use Class Intercom, and I was able to go in and change the post. And then going back, I'm like, oh shoot, there's a graphic tied to that too. So I had to go to the student that created the graphic and say, hey, can you make this quick change? And it was in like 2 minutes. It was done and fixed. And so I think that's a great story because we all make mistakes and we all do, it happens. I've done it many times, like too many times to even count. And I just think the whole process, as far as this whole team works so well together and we're able to communicate in that way and get something like that fixed, and that it was not a catastrophe by any means. Just an awesome,
I think that's why I
it
wanted
was
to
an
share.
awesome learning experience for all of us. Because you know what? I'm the one that goes in and hits approve.
Right. Yeah.
So it's my fault. So it happens. But I think that it's a real world experience, and it can be fixed and we all learn from it. So
cool. Well, to wrap things up, I know you guys got class. I heard the bell ring, but any of you guys, as far as the students, want to share anything maybe to students that are thinking about going into this or being involved in this kind of what we're calling now the school social media team, and that's gaining a lot of momentum across the country, by the way. You guys have kind of really set the bar high for that. Any advice or thoughts you'd have for them? And what I think is neat is probably not a lot of you want to go maybe into journalism or something like that, but you still like being involved with this, and you can take some of these things you're learning into whatever career or degree you want to get into. So I'll just kind of open it up, and hopefully someone has something to say kind of maybe to fellow students. And maybe there's a call out to other students at your school too. And I would love to hear feedback on that as well. Like, have students come up to you and go, hey, that was really cool tweet or something like that. Have you guys had any of that happen, or maybe not?
Has anybody said anything?
I've had like some people who like know that I'm on the team. So like I know after the IBA championship, like I was talking to one of the kids on the team, his name's Mitch, and he's like, oh yeah, could you like post our winning picture? And so I got on and I posted their picture. And so like I think that's cool. Like we get the opportunity to like kind of like pick what we want to share, and like we get to be the ones like send that out there. Like I just kind of feel like privileged in that way, I guess.
Awesome. Yeah, that's
and I
cool.
know one other thing that we talked about on that social media day was I encourage them when they create a post to give credit to themselves.
Yeah.
And so, a couple of them have done that, given credit, image by Heidi or image by Megan. And I didn't say they had to do it, but I think that's powerful too, because I have heard back from people in the community and from the school just saying that's awesome that those are student created, because you don't, I guess with the emojis and stuff like that, you assume that it's part, student involvement in there, but you're not 100% sure. But as soon as they put their name on it, that's awesome. And like I mentioned, I think on that day, and I've probably talked to you about it, is they give themselves credit, then they're creating that portfolio. And so
Absolutely.
If they want to apply for any other internships or something when they move, go on to college, or they have something that they want to document, they can go back and they have documentation that this was mine, this was on our social media account, that type of thing. So some of them have done that, and I think it's great, but it does create some, I do get feedback from staff members and members of the community that actually follow and see that. And they kind of ask questions, how does that work? What are you doing with that? So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, and we've seen even a new school up in Wisconsin that just started at the beginning of March, a increase in engagement and just kind of more retweets and likes and stuff like that, because they're generating stuff in the classroom and from students. So that's very interesting. We need to do a case study on that in itself. But so to wrap things up, anybody have anything they would want to say to maybe some students that are potentially watching this, or even people like Heather that are trying to figure out, is it really worth, getting students involved in social media at the school from a, kind of the main accounts?
I would say it's definitely worth it because in today's society, social media is completely like exploding. So essentially this is like a great medium in which to kind of get certain messages across. But the important thing is to, also have fun with it and just make sure, you do something that is going to appeal to like your audience,
That's great. And do you feel like you guys now have built a trust with Heather and your admin team to talk about social media too? Because we've seen that. Anybody feel like you guys started doing Snapchat. We didn't even talk about that we can't run that through class intercom, but you've kind of tested that out. And so just maybe the level of trust has been increased with just kind of the staff. Any thoughts on that?
You guys know who runs that? I'm not affiliated with that. Who runs that? I don't know who runs that.
There's a couple.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
2 of them.
Yeah.
I'm on it, but I gave up Snapchat for once.
Okay. All right. That's cool.
I think there
Awesome.
is a definite, I think the trust factor is huge. And I think that's pretty powerful in education, just to say that you trust them.
Yeah.
The more they do it, we've had these conversations too. Their content that's going out, I have to hit approve, but 99% of the time, and probably 100% of the time, I wouldn't really necessarily need to, because I trust what they're doing, and they've proven that they have, great skills. They're sharing exactly what we need to be out there. And so I think that's always a conversation too, is how it's evolved, in the fact that it has started out as I felt like I combed through it a little bit more, but in all reality, if I would just turn the button off so they could hit approve, they definitely have gained my trust, and I would wholeheartily support that.
Awesome. Yeah, Tim Holes did that at Hampton with some students that have been just doing awesome for a game to do score updates. So he's like, I'm not going to hit approve for every score update. So he turned them over to a moderator so you guys could just approve. So awesome. Sherry doesn't have any questions, but said it's been very helpful. So, and Andy's pretty close in Excel. I'm sure he could reach out to you guys. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Heather.
Yes, thank you.
Keep doing awesome things, creating content, sharing your guys' school story, and setting the bar high to just really have a voice, a student voice. And we've got your page, your Meet Your Viking Voice page here as well. And be sure to follow the Grand Island Northwest Vikings at GINW Vikings to see what they're up to and all the awesome content they're creating. So thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You
You too.
See ya.